Today, we're going to be talking about LOS custom fields in the Arive company settings. Let's get into it. Now, right up at the start, we have our main page with all of our existing custom fields. If you've never gone in here before, this will be blank. But soon you will be filling it with many custom fields to capture all of the data that Arive does not capture natively. Now you're going to notice right up at the top that things are divided into two sections, loan and property and loan center. These refer to the tabs in the specific loan file. So loan and property, the very first tab in the loan file, and that contains the loan program and things like that. The custom field section for that is on the very bottom of the page. In loan center, depending on whether you have modern or legacy view, the custom fields are going to be on the lower right-hand side. You're going to have to scroll down to see them usually, especially once you have a lot of activity and things and loan team members filled into it. So neither of these are going to be movable or visible at the top of the screen, at least as of release 2005.9.0. They are limited right now to their own custom fields card or section, and they are both at the bottom of the screen. That being said, there are other ways to kind of nudge people there to look at it. So let's jump right into creating a new field, and you're going to find that all of this really carries over when you're editing existing fields. Clicking that new custom field button opens a modal, and we have a lot of information and settings to take in here. Field name is going to be the name that it's referenced in automations, and it is going to be the label that shows up in Arive LOS. So you can't give it a different name than what the label will be. So keep that in mind when writing this out. Also, I would recommend making sure that the name is not the same as another field in Arive. You'll see this later when you're trying to work with custom fields and custom field values in Arive automations. If the name is the same, it can be difficult to tell which is the custom field and which is the native field. So if you are trying to capture some information that maybe could already exist somewhere else, make the name distinct and easy to find for later, or at the very least, give it some sort of additional label like custom field or company field so that whoever is administrating this can find it and they will thank you later. This little toggle under it of required field, what that will do is it will prevent the file from moving forward without that field filled in with a value. Now, this can be useful, but also can be a bit obnoxious, especially if the field you're building only gets used in certain conditions. You could very easily build this for a field that maybe only applies for VA or for FHA files, but if you put this required field toggle on, it will be a stop on all files, despite it being meant to be used conditionally. Keep in mind, you can accomplish the same functionality by using Arive automations and evaluating the contents of this field while not using this hard stop for everything that is this toggle. So use this toggle very carefully, only in places where it actually makes sense. Down below that, you get into what type of input this is. Now, a little bit tricky. You're going to notice that the area of input is actually a drop-down, and it has an option of input or drop-down. So drop-down is a type of custom field you can create. However, it is a little bit outside of the workflow. Let's talk about the kind of the standard input fields that we have available to us. Right, with that drop down, you're going to see you have Boolean, which will render as a toggle, and the output of it is true false. Date field is going to use a date picker, and it is month, day, year. Date, time, same kind of deal, except what's very interesting about this is date and time will render as two separate fields on the LOS, but will be saved as one value. So you'll have one box that is the date picker, and you'll have another box where you have to select or input a time. It is a little bit clunky as of the current release in the way that you're going to interact with these, but if you need to capture it all together, this is a way to do it. If you're not going to be evaluating it in any way, consider using a text field for that. Next up, we have number, which just restricts the text input to numbers. Decimal, which is, similar situation, except it will allow decimal numbers. Number will only allow whole number values. Amount is numbers, but it's going to format it in a currency value. Percentage, same deal as decimal, except it's going to add a decimal figure, or it's going to add a percentage at the end. Short text and long text. These are going to be either 1-line fields or 3 to 5-line fields. You can see that they have character limits, and these are hard limits. It is a little bit tricky with the long text field. Sometimes you want an area where you can really dump a lot of information. A common use case I see for this is a loan narrative that you can reference and evaluate a little more automatically. The problem is that 500 character limit comes up pretty quickly. So you need to consider if the use case you have for this long text field, if that character limit is actually going to do the job, or if you need to store that information another way. That being said, let's move on to our next piece, which is the drop down. So once you go to drop down, you're going to notice that what was originally your selecting which type of input you're going to have now gives you the option of, am I going to do single select or multi-select? These are important depending on how you're going to evaluate this and what choices you have. You're going to see that it populates by default with option 1 and then has a grayed out area to add additional options, or you can add an other field. The other field is just a recommendation, but really it is just it's just text. All of these are really text values that can be selected. You'll notice when you hover over one of these options that a new checkbox appears in that row for default selected. Here is a tip. I do recommend having a default selected value for this. Things get a little bit tricky downstream when you get to your reporting part of this and you have blank values. You'll find it a lot easier to expand upon this and build automations if you always have a value in this field and you just evaluate what that field is. Building automations that require the field to be blank are historically problematic, not just in Arive, but in programming in general. And so my strong recommendation is to always have an option for default, even if that option is nothing selected or something along those lines. You're going to find it a lot easier when you get to the next step and you're building automations off of these. That being said, you can change these options at any time. So you can start with a couple and add additional later. It will give you little bits of warning about when you change these. What can be tricky later is if you delete a value that did exist, it is a little unclear as to what happens to the custom field that had those prior values. I've seen it stay sometimes, but the system can warn that it could be deleted. Be cognizant of that when building this out, that if you have a drop down and users are changing later, that could present an issue. Don't build your entire workflow off of these values always existing. Just another little tip from me. Moving to the other properties tab, these get a little more straightforward. So show this field in, and you're going to notice that dropdown has two familiar questions, loan and property and loan center. Again, those are the tabs in the loan file where this custom field is going to show up. You have to pick one or the other. Loan purpose, meaning this custom field will only display on loans that have that purpose. It's going to default to all, but you have purchase or refinance. Mortgage type, when you click on that, you'll notice that you have many options. It's going to default to all, but you can create custom fields that only apply on specific products. I find that to be one of the most useful ways to use custom fields to capture data that Arive doesn't currently have a bucket for, especially, kind of non-QM products or HELOC products. You can create custom fields that only display there when you're dealing with those certain products and those kind of extra stipulations or extra data points start to come in. Show in reports. This one is important for applying this later. Now, right, pipeline reports and revenue reports. Pipeline reports are accessible by a lot of the operations team members based on the roles that they have assigned. You're going to notice when you go to pipeline reports, these custom fields show up at the very bottom of the file. This is one of the best ways to use custom fields, to be able to draw a report that contains all of them or contains some of them, and to be able to evaluate it in mass. That also can be used as a way to work from the custom fields by running a report on their values. You cannot yet filter by the values of the custom field, but you can filter by other criteria, generate the report, and then in your Excel file or elsewhere, filter by that custom field values that were output. Revenue reports, that's primarily used by payroll teams. So you have to have the payroll or an admin type role on your user account to have access to it. But if you are building something that is going to be used by payroll, you do have to check that box for them to be able to access it when running reports. Moving to the right side of this, you're going to notice that there is a table that describes the different roles that users can have. Check boxes for if they can view and if they can edit. This sounds exactly like what it is. You are deciding here by checking or unchecking these boxes who can view this field in the loan file and who can edit it. Now, edit it doesn't have any locks on it by default. They can edit that custom field at any time. Just recently, and we're recording this at the time of release 2025.9.0, they added some conditional access options for this. So you'll notice next to these checkboxes, there is a little button that kind of looks like a pencil. And if you click it, a new edit conditional access window is going to pop up where you can set up conditional access for this role for editing. And right now, the only option is adjusting for loan status. So now what you can do is you can kind of box the editing access within this particular time period of when it's in these statuses, or when it's not in these statuses, right? A very common use case would be, excluding edit access when the file is adversed or archived. Very common use case you might apply to some of these because you wouldn't want them to change in that case. Use these tactically as you see fit. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you rely on these videos to stay up to date, consider supporting the channel using the link down in the description. See you next time.